Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending this inspirational interview with Artful Minds. For those who don't know what Artful Minds is, we are just a online artist educational community for your artistic development and growth. We try to focus on not just your painting aspects of being an artist, but also the business side of being an artist. All right, saying that, I think everybody here pretty much knows who I'm interviewing, but our inspirational discussion today is with Amy Erickson. She's a well-known artist and teacher with a global reputation who has delivered talks and demonstrations in many locations around the world. Amy is admired for her engaging presentation style and her ability to paint a wide range of subjects. I want to say thank you for joining us, Amy. It's a real pleasure having you here.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to scroll through some images. I'm just going to share my screen. And as I'm going to scroll through some images, and if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself, kind of an origin story, that'd be great.
Like the art part of my story, or like my
the art,
whole life?
how you started, where you're going, who you are, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, sure. So I was born in Paris, France, and my dad was working, he was doing postdoctorate work in astrophysics or in particle physics. And then later he switched to astrophysics, and my mom had been an English teacher. So then they moved back to California. I feel like all kids have an interest in drawing, and then they sort of divide themselves off. Like some kids get positive feedback. I don't know exactly what makes the difference, but I always liked it and I got positive feedback. And then I started taking oil painting classes when I was about 6. So oil paint has always been a part of my consciousness and my materials, and like the smell of it instantly grounds me and gives me inspiration. I love the smell of linseed oil. So then I grew up in Silicon Valley. I went to the same high school as Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And art was not really on the radar at that point. It was just something that I did for myself. I wasn't really taking any more classes. In high school, I was in the orchestra and just doing, high school stuff. In college, I had never heard of art school. So scholastics and academics were really important in my family. So I thought I would major in English. And then I discovered this illustration program at the university I was at. And it turned out to be a really good illustration program with world-class design training. And so I could not believe that was an option, that they would let you take those classes and then graduate. So that is what I did. And here I am.
That's fantastic. You threw me for a loop with you being born in France or Paris, and that your father was an astrophysicist. You don't hear that very often, do you?
I know. And I have 2 siblings. Like my brother's 14 months older and he was born in California, and my sister's 18 months younger than me and she was born in England. And then I have 2 more siblings who are also born in California.
That's fantastic. The whole multiculturalism all in one family kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my mom taught us all to speak French when we were little. And yeah, I was lucky to, like, in our family growing up, like learning was just really important, and books were really important, and music. My mom played the piano and had friends over to play piano duets and violin, piano, cello trios. And so we had like live classical music in our house.
It's fantastic.
One of my favorite things.
Wow. And if you speak French, you're more Canadian than I am.
Oui.
So one of my first questions is, I can't remember how I found you on Instagram, but that's where I found you. And there was that instant attraction to your work. It was just without a doubt, yeah, I'm gonna like that. And I'm just gonna look through your entire feed for the next hour and a half. Now, I think I know why I'm attracted to your work, but why do you think it resonates with so many other people as well?
Oh, wow. Honestly, in hearing you ask that question, like the first thing I want to know is what it is for you. Like my guess would be like, we like the same stuff.
Yeah, without a doubt, possibly, yeah.
Like you like what I like, because like my painting is mostly like, look at this awesome thing that I saw.
So you're not going to really guess any.
I mean, you mean like,
reasons.
why do you think my work is appealing? Beauty appeals.
I'll accept that.
Okay. What do you think?
For my analytical monkey brain, I find you use a lot of high key colors, and you also incorporate contrast in quite a few of them. But I'm a temperature nut, and I really love temperature. especially shifting in the same value. And as soon as I see that that is what you do a lot of, it was, yeah, I'm just enamored with this work. And I just spent the next hour looking through everything.
Wow. Okay. I'm so glad that you answered that question too.
But that's my viewpoint, I guess. I mean, right?
Yeah. But I have a friend, I will tell you, I have a friend who says, Amy, you paint the place where we all want to live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's accurate.
Less analytical and more poetic, maybe.
Yes. That's what I'd let other people be, poetic. Amy also has come out with Plein Air Techniques for Artists, her recent book, which you can now buy on Amazon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste links to her website and Instagram, as well as to Amazon, if you have not already purchased the book. There we go. And in her book, she talks about, on page 66, to be specific, if you have the book in front of you, the concept of a mother color. And I've been there. I've heard that from a lot of instructors. It has to do with using the mother color of the light, which ends up being either a cool light or a warm light with yellow. However, you mentioned when you cannot figure out the color of the light, use pink. And that kind of just caught me off guard. So I have to ask you, why pink?
Okay. So there's a couple of reasons. Number one is it's in the event that you can't identify the color of the light. So it's not meant to be a default. It's meant to be like a fallback if you don't have something else. But also, like, there's a couple other reasons. Somewhere in my brain, somewhere, I thought it had to do with Russian painting or something. There's this idea that I didn't make up, that is that you lean the lights towards pink. And I can't, I've been unsuccessful in identifying the source of that idea to me. And also I can say that in a landscape, there's a lot of green. So a complementary light source is going to give you a wider range of things to do. And your painting's not going to end up like the green leaning towards yellow, or the green leaning towards blue is very different than the green leaning towards pink.
Yes, very true. Interesting. Now, would you say that you would want to have a mother color of a cool pink or more of a warm pink? I know this is rather specific, but I think it changes quite a bit, especially if it's a high tinting pigment, right? Like a quin or something like that.
I mean, I would just go with cadmium red light.
There you go. So yeah,
Like,
I'm a
I
temperature
mean,
geek, so I really like to know.
in a given situation, you would draw on observation to help you make a decision about that. But I mean, the whole cool warm thing, like, I think I could write a whole book on the cool warm thing, but mostly it's just a distraction, right? Mostly it's just like forgetting that it's always relative, and like,
Yeah.
cool and warm within a single painting is not, it's important, but also the overall warm or cool of the whole painting is important. Like, does the whole thing have a warm feel, or does the whole thing have a cool feel? I'm not one to advocate cool light, warm shadow, or I would never say warm light, cool shadow. I don't do warm light, cool shadow. If anything, I would make the lights cooler, because lighter values are naturally cooler than darker values.
I guess it depends on the situation. North light, yes. Hot sunny day, I don't know. I guess I'm now gonna have to be a little more observant, eh?
I mean, lots of times we talk about hue, about color temperature as it relates to the hue only, right? But honestly, like, darker is just inherently warmer. So yeah, it's a moving, like, it's a chess game, right? Like, there's no single, this is the answer, but we just cannot leave value out of the equation, and darker is inherently warmer.
Okay, I'm gonna have to give that some thought.
I feel very comfortable saying that in a very confident tone of voice.
You're gonna break my brain tonight, which is great, because if you don't challenge yourself, the norms that we hear, right, then there's no progressing. I've heard that warm light, cool shadows, cool light, warm shadows forever.
You've heard cool light, warm shadows?
Yeah. Cool light, warm shadows, warm light, cool shadows, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's artists they say that's the only rule in painting. They'll stake their life on it. But to hear you say that's not necessarily the case is quite interesting.
I will leg wrestle them over it.
No doubt, a little less extreme, right?
Yeah.
I want to share my screen again here because this is an interesting painting of yours. Some city somewhere. But
New
what
York City, it's the Flatiron Building.
Okay, I recognize that it was one of those shapes buildings, but I think every city kind of has that. So I wasn't sure if it was New York or just a city near you kind of thing. But what I found really interesting is I believe, and watching some videos that you have online already, that this is just an old pre-painted panel that you scraped off, didn't like, and pulled it up and started painting this and left 30% of that still showing, and it adds a lot of character. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, why do you like doing that?
I mean, it doesn't always work like this one does. This one works because the scrapey parts in the shadows, for like in that lower right quadrant, the scrapey parts just make it feel like there's like light moving around down there. But the reason I like painting over old scrapers is that it automatically gives you some color relationships from the get-go. And sometimes they're unexpected ones that you wouldn't have thought of, and they're interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that area is just there for context of, it looks like buildings, so therefore it is buildings, right?
Oh, those are buildings, yeah.
But just a variation of the,
I mean, you
depth of the
know,
color.
like those buildings, you know, there was a lot there. It's like 18 buildings
I can
and
imagine.
17,000 windows. And, you know, the idea of an abstract, like if there's a scientific paper that's like 120 pages, there'll be a one-page abstract that sort of summarizes and condenses and expresses the gist of the whole thing. And that's what you do when you abstract part of a painting. You summarize it and condense it and just give the gist of it in a brief way.
And I think that actually summarizes you as an artist quite well, as a compliment, of course.
Thank you.
Okay, going back to temperature. So I have a question here. What do you think is more important, value in hue or value in temperature? It's kind of splitting hairs, but
Can you want to give me your definition of temperature?
temperature is whether things are relatively warm or cool.
Yeah, so in my teaching, I don't teach temperature. I just teach hue, value, chroma.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, precisely because those are the three like essential characteristics of color, and temperature is a relative one. So it's not an essential identity of a color, because you can take a color and put it one place it's warm, you can put it somewhere else it's cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, so I just would talk about, like, you know, if I want to change something but not the value, then I'm going to change the hue and the chroma, which will change the temperature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, when I interviewed Mark D'Alessio, he was the same. He learned in Italy in one of the ateliers, and they didn't learn temperature, but he's had to since learn it because everyone keeps asking about it. But the way you've just described it is, yeah, there's nothing relative as well. Value is relative, but it's not as relative as temperature. Hue and chroma are kind of set as well. So I can see why you'd leave it out for sure.
Right, because like value, anything, you can compare it to a value in scale and say it is a 2, even if it looks like a 3 or a 4 over here. It still is.
Oh, good point. Yes, it has a defined value,
like
right?
You can line it up. And then like hue also can be scientifically organized and correlated and numbered, like they did in the Munsell system. But temperature, you can't do that with.
No, that's right. You're right. You guys are breaking my brain.
But I feel that like it becomes a bit of a red herring in the context of learning how to paint, because people don't quite understand it and they want to understand it. But overall, it's just not that complicated. It's just like, you know, you just look at is it over like?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated.
No.
So I'm going to share this one image since I have it. And I guess this explains exactly what we're talking about, because we could take this green here, this green and the violet are the same value without a doubt. However, I would call this warm and I would call this cool. But you're saying basically, yeah, I want a green in here. I'm going to have a hue change to violet. And that's all it is really to you. And the chroma, of course, is the same-ish.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, saying that there's warm and cool within a value area is saying the same thing. It's just using a slightly different language that's less specific.
Yes.
So particularly when I'm teaching, I want it to be specific because that's understandable. And, this is a picture that's overall cool.
True.
No question, right? Like, is there warmth in it? Of course. There's that little bit on the upper right where you see the canvas tone, and you see that in a lot of different places, but it's, it's overall cool, but it's not like a big mystery. It's just like how it, it's.
No, I think you successfully started me down the path of changing the way I think.
Okay.
That's pretty exciting. That's pretty exciting. Okay. Also in your book, I want to talk about color ladders, and I got to share my screen again. Just give me a second.
Okay, good.
Because I thought this was an interesting exercise. I haven't seen it before.
I made it up.
Yeah, you were the original. So my question is, you talk about these color ladders, and it comes up with the statement that all pigments have a value point of highest saturation. And I think that's wonderful. I don't think I've really paid attention to that. And that's makes so much sense. After which you say, you describe it as they chalk out, which again, makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing I don't understand about some of the color ladders, like instead of just going from your sap green to white, you say for your color ladders, what is it? You'll adjust them. Why here you've added yellow, here you've added red, and here you've added blue. So what's the practical benefit for artists doing these color ladders by just adding various amounts of pigments as you move forward?
Okay, so the one on the left is sap green plus white. So that's like the control. So we can sort of see what is sap green out of the tube, and then adding, incrementally adding more white. And you can see that it's not a perfect scale in terms of like the intervals are not equal. There's a big jump, there's a couple big jumps, and then like the top 4, there's barely any change. So that just goes along with my principle that you don't have to do it right. You just have to do it and then see what you can see, because that'll educate you. So you can see that the chromatic peak in the sap green control column is just down 1. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you think it's here? You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it might be between those two, right? But I didn't put every single step in, so that's okay. It's just like a general. You can see that it increases and then it drops off. Now, another principle is that every color is the strongest when it comes out of the tube, and any dilution of it is a dilution of the chroma. But in practical terms, we just don't see that much color at those darker values. So it has to get to a point where it's doing both, light enough for the color to really bloom before the color starts dropping off. Mm-hmm. So those other 3 columns, all 3 of those columns use more than just 3 pigments. It's not just sap green and white and yellow. It's whatever else was on my palette too. And you can see that there's a bunch of different marks. Like there's little experiments and like what else could happen at this value. And that's how I really consider these. But the 2 paintings on the right are both really exemplary of a practical application of this principle. Like these are both plein air pieces. The top one I remember very specifically because it's an unusual palette, but like the dark is a mixed shale. It's that Vasari mixture called shale that looks like burnt umber when it comes out of the tube, but then it's actually a little bit more purple. So then as you start adding color to that, you can see that it gets lighter, but then it'll get a little pinker or a little bluer, and then it gets lighter again and it's a little yellower or a little bluer.
So it gets you in the habit of, because like you say in your book, you always have to make adjustments after you adjust the value with some sort of color. And so I guess the exercise with the color ladders is to get you in that habit to always be shifting the color.
Yes, it builds an awareness for you that like when you go up a rung in value, then you're on that rung, and there's a range of things that can happen at that value. Which one do you want? I made up this exercise in a workshop one time when all my students were having issues with their greens chalking out. And I was like, okay, we're going to do a green exercise. And we just did like, make a dark green and then like make a little value scale out of it, right? Like the control. And then like make another one, but put other stuff in it to make it change color, like put more yellow in it or try different things, but add other colors. And you can see, like, particularly in the yellow one, that it really solves the chalking out problem by raising the chroma at those higher values. It's also a hue shift, but it gives you a greater chromatic range at higher value.
Yeah. And so would you say that's kind of the solution whenever you see a chalky color, would be to find a way to increase its chroma?
Not necessarily. Often, the other thing to look for when you have a chalky color is a temperature problem. Like, if it's often, it'll look chalky or muddy. If, like, muddy is often warm when you need it cool, and chalky is often cool when you need it warm.
Nice. Thank you for that. I was just trying to get a better understanding of what practical use of these exercises. And another thing I want to talk about, this is what I'm excited for. This has to do with glow, which is part of your book that talks about special effects. It sounds cliche when you call it all about special effects and how to achieve them, but it's not,
Right.
because this is quite practical, and a lot of people don't understand this and don't know about it. And I've always assumed, I knew that to get that glow, that sense when you look at something and you squint, even though it's a painting, you would need a cool center and a warmer exterior. But the way you described it, I thought was very interesting and quite literal, in the sense that, yeah, you have your cool bright center, but the ring around it is what's really the high chromatic color. Can you talk about this a little bit?
I can. I'd be happy to. And first of all, it's true that the center is cooler, but I didn't say that in the book.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
No, like, you're right that it is cooler, but that's just because it's very light in value and relatively colorless.
Yeah, very low chroma, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, in this example, it looks white. It's not white, but it looks kind of white. And then the glow happens off the object. That's the trick. Like, when you think about the moon in the night sky, the moon itself is bright, but the glow is happening in the sky around the moon. So there's this interesting phenomenon in painting where you want something to be very lit, and you make it lighter and lighter, and then all of a sudden it doesn't feel lit because it doesn't have enough color. And it's interesting to see what happens when you just put more color around the edge of it, as I've done here. It makes your brain see that central disc as having color, even though the color lives off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like what we're used to seeing in the sky.
Yeah.
It's so blinding in the center that we know not to look at it.
Yeah, you got to be careful with this one too. Like, I've done paintings that people are like, oh, I feel like I need my dark glasses to look at this. Then they don't buy it.
Which is the ultimate goal, right?
That's right. When people are like, what response do you want people to have to your paintings? I'm like, I want them to reach for their wallets.
At least you're honest, 100%.
That's just...
That's so funny. All right. Okay. Wow, that time has just flew by. So that takes up the half-hour mark. Okay. So if anybody has any questions in chat, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll just keep on going.
Amy says there's no rule on shadow temperature.
Yeah.
That is true, Sue. What do I tell you as students? Look for warm and cool in the light and warm and cool in the shadow. Yeah,
you always have that shift. Even though it may be a cool shadow, you always have that warm and cool, won't you?
You do. And you know who does that really nicely is Ray Roberts. You can see it so clearly in his Vermilion Cliffs paintings. Like, he's painted like a bluish shade of purple, and then there's these marks in there that are like a reddish shade of purple, and it just reads perfectly.
Yeah, because globally that reddish purple was still cool, I guess, and it's still a cool shadow kind of.
They're just warm and cool relative to each other within that
true.
shadow,
Yeah. Beautiful. I could see you correcting me a lot on temperature.
I mean, and it's not to say that you're wrong. It's just to say that there's a more specific language that I think is more helpful.
Yeah. I can see that now more, because I know when I talk to students or other artists, temperature is very confusing because it is so relative, right?
It is. And people tend to generalize. Like, often we're kind of looking for a rule or a recipe or something that we can just be like, okay, it's this. I'm going to do it this way. But temperature is not one of those things. Painting's not one of those things.
Here's a fun one. And I kind of got a peek of what your early paintings were when we were talking at the very beginning, but I don't really know anything beyond the work that you have on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So my question is, as you've progressed through your career, do you find yourself going more abstract, being more abstract?
So I had to think long and hard about this, and I'm going to share my screen with you because I have on the right is the painting I did yesterday, and on the left is the painting I did in 1990. A past so distant, I can hardly recall what we were even
Absolutely.
like back then. And thinking about this, like the answer to your question is really no. I don't think I've become more abstract, and not that these two paintings are representative of the overall thing, but so my training was in visual design communication, and the design principles are the same no matter whether you were going into automotive and industrial design or interior design or graphic design and illustration, or no matter what your design is, the principles are the same. The elements vary a little bit, but the principles apply. And the design principles are abstract. It's things like shape and, in painting, brushwork. So a painting can be abstract in a lot of ways. And I think I've been interested in that as long as I've been painting.
Yeah, and interestingly, I still can see elements of you in your 1990 portrait there with your shapes of color. It's just in the current portrait, they just have to be larger shapes, especially in the hair. I love to seeing that difference. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
A question in the chat came up, and she says you obviously love your color. Do you frequently try new colors, or are you basically loyal to your palette?
I am not loyal. I am constantly auditioning new colors and also rummaging through drawers and
That's so funny.
auditioning new characters. Yeah, pretty constantly. And sometimes it's, a matter of like what I want, and sometimes it's a matter of what I have or what I can find. It's very often like what I need. This really relates to the color ladders. Like if I need something at a certain value and I can't get it with my palette, then I will go get another color.
Even mid-painting.
Sure.
That's great. That's great, because you often hear other artists say, never introduce another color into a painting.
Oh, they do? They
from
say
your standard palette, but I've never understood why. Didn't make any sense to me, and I'm glad to hear you do it.
I very often, like, I can't achieve what I want. And like, there's enough context already. Like, I'll give you an example. I don't have a visual example to show you like what this looks like, but this has happened to me more than once where I've like maxed out on a painting and I cannot get something to look white at a certain value. And I have to bring in dioxazine purple.
Really?
I cannot, yes. Like I said, it would be really great to have a picture at this point, but yes, it's almost like it has to have a certain chromatic difference, or
You think that's because of the palette you were using at the time? Or is it just kind of would you say that's kind of a general?
It is, I don't think it's general.
Okay,
but it's not always dioxazine purple. I know specifically that it has been that one, but sometimes it's ultramarine.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting comment that we have, and I have to agree with it. How edges are treated in modern paintings is interesting. I see lots of fuzziness being very popular as opposed to harder edges.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I've seen it in both. I mean, if you have hard edges, but in your case where you're painting high key, all those hard edges kind of become one, and in turn are fuzzy, right? They become joined just through value alone.
Do they count as edges if they're the same value?
That's a good question, and I'm sure we could spend a long time debating that. Kind of moving towards the plein air aspect of it, because I'm a plein air painter and I just love plein air, and I'd rather be outside than painting in the studio, without a doubt. That being said, what do you look for when you go out plein air painting for a location that you just want to set up your easel and start at it?
I'm prepared to answer this because you warned me this question was coming. Like if that question came to me out of the blue, I would be like, I have no idea. I just look around for stuff. But I only have this insight into myself because I had, like I said, a good friend who is the same and told me this, like about myself, that I'm a backdoor painter. I like to, like, if you think of the painting being like on like an object in the house, and that the one way to get there would be to walk up the front walkway, open the front door, walk right in, and there it is. Go ahead. Then a backdoor painter would be like, oh, I see the front door, but I'm going to go through the side yard and see what these flowers are doing this time of year. And I'm going to like go see what's happening over here. And then when I get in, I'm going to go in the back door of the house and I'm going to sort of like, see what it looks like from over here in this room. Or maybe, oh, I just saw something else altogether. That's what I'm going to paint. Like it's sort of like there's not an assumption that I'm going to paint, I think, is really the bottom line. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really care if I paint or not. I might just enjoy my day.
Interesting. So you're never under any pressure to actually set up your easel and paint. Like,
No,
nice,
I'm not.
nice. So how does one get so chill?
Well, how? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I see people doing the opposite. I see them like pulling up and parking and getting their easels out and starting to paint and going, Amy, you better get started. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but
Well, something obviously captured their attention because I couldn't even do that. I got to spend some time looking around first.
some
Right?
people don't. Some people will get out and be like, okay, there's the view I came to see. I'm painting it.
Yeah, postcard view kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
This next question kind of relates in a sense that the previous question is, when outside, do you focus on getting a painting or exploring the concept and kind of taking notes?
I mean, there are sometimes like in competitions where you're required to turn in a certain number of paintings. You know, there's like a solid expectation that you're going to have some work to turn in. But I don't feel that my work is super consistent under those circumstances. I don't feel like that everything I produce that week is like off the charts, you know? But I mean, which is fine with me. Like, not everything is the best thing. That's just how everything is. But how do I do it? Yeah, I usually need, if I'm thinking about making a picture, that's not my best in. Usually it'll be like some idea based on the feel that translates into a two-dimensional design idea, or like a color relationship, or
So you get more excited about the process really than the idea of painting the scene, right?
I mean, the idea, yeah, the scene is just a carrier for the idea, which I do like. Yeah. I'm mentally kind of going through different paintings that I've done. Like the color notes approach where you're just making color notes. For me, the bigger question isn't like at the moment of painting what's motivating me. It's like what got me there, and how do I get there to that point where I'm ready to paint and I'm thinking about painting, and like my brain is in that place where I'm like, oh, I got it. I'm in.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't really know what it's like for other people. People talk about, this is one of those topics where people talk about it and you're like, I hear your words, and do they mean what they mean to me, or do you mean something else? So it's a tough one.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so do I bring a painting back into the studio? I'm actually prepared for this one. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, that was actually one of my questions. Perfect.
Yeah, so here I did take a photo of the landscape, which is the upper left. And then I have my field study, which is the 6x12 below it. And then I have the 14x18 that I did. And I had never really looked through the photos at all, ever. I was just like, oh, I think I took some photos that day. So when I made this slide, but it looks like that exact same cloud.
Isn't that interesting?
It was
Yeah.
like
So
really
when you
tall.
enlarged this piece, you didn't look at that photo at all. You just went straight from your plein air work.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I have another picture of really what guides me in that is like, it's not even a copy of the original painting. It's just like music is the best analogy I have here. It's like, if you know a song, you can sing it once, you can sing it again. It's not exactly the same, but it's the same song.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize it as being at the same song, even if you hold some notes a little longer, or if you draw out the ending, or if you sing it faster or whatever. That it's kind of like that with a painting. Like if you're doing it bigger and at in a different format, some things carry through and some things don't.
Yeah. And the beauty of plein air is you have your memory as well, right?
Exactly.
For some reason, you can retain that feeling, that understanding of what it was like to be there, and translate it into a larger piece without having to rely on the photo, just your reference.
Yeah, you have your memory and you have all the knowledge you've ever had.
True. Yeah.
So all your decisions kind of stem from there.
Yeah. Because if you start pulling out that photo, you know what's going to happen, right?
Well, the thing is, like, we can paint so much better than the photo. Like,
Yes.
this is kind of an example of that. This is the one that's in the book. And it shows the location and then kind of the cropping for the painting, and then the painting. And, it's a weird painting. It's a weird subject. It's a weird building, but I chose this one because it had sunlight falling on it, and it's right around the corner, and I needed to do a demo for the book.
That's so funny.
Like there are so many other considerations than the like artistic ones, you know? It's like how
Yeah.
much time do you have? How far do you want to drive? Did it start raining all of a sudden? Like all those things make a difference. Anyway, I'm satisfied with this painting because I really like that transition that from red to gray at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
it's a nuance for sure. That's really nice.
Isn't that pretty? Yeah, I love that. And I love that overall, it like even though it's a weird painting and a weird subject, it's so much more appealing than the original while still being kind of true to what was actually there.
Yeah, yeah. I find it very, very intriguing for sure. The way you cropped it, the way you created the composition. And that kind of brings us to a question asked in chat here. It says, so what percentage of your outdoor work do you consider finished, or do you consider mostly studies, like that one for the book, other than when you're in a competition, of course? But
Uh, let's see. Do I mostly finish them on location? I don't know. I don't really think about them in terms of finish. I just love the small ones so much. And I like all the, you know, like if I in the desert for a week and I do a ton of small paintings. Yeah, some of them that end up at a point where there's nothing I would change and they're adorable and they need a really expensive 22 karat gold frame and they'll be delightful. And others I feel like, oh, this one could be developed a little bit more. Like it doesn't seem to be doing everything it could do, but maybe it got really dusty and I had to get back in the car. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So it's whatever it is. I
Okay.
honestly feel like it's whatever it is. Like it could be any one of those things.
So you don't necessarily go back and adjust the ones that could benefit from more work. You just kind of use them or don't use them, I guess, for larger pieces.
I mean, sometimes I do go back and see if I can make adjustments to a painting that I have very mixed results with that.
Loses that freshness, I guess, eh? That spontaneity.
It's just not there anymore in so
Yeah.
many ways. So like sometimes it's a simple thing, like there was a clamp on the upper corner. Like sometimes I'll just leave that
Oh, yeah.
where the, you know, tone showed because it's kind of sometimes I like having that there, but sometimes I'll paint over it and then it's done. But is that better? I don't.
I would argue not, because I just love the working aspects of plein air painting, right?
Okay.
Getting those pieces in that have straight from artist to collector, and you got the fingerprint on the side because they couldn't get in their panel holder. They got the clamp marks. To me, that says everything about the experience and the day that artist went through. So why would you want to cover any of that up, right? I think it adds more value, really.
Yeah.
But that's my personal experience. So I like this next question because it kind of reminds me of color choices, whether or not you just specifically change colors for your pieces. So she says, do you base your color choices on what you see, or do you take the liberties with it depending on how you want to present it?
Shannon, that's a great question. I address this in my book. Let's all turn to page 41. Yes. You guys, I honestly, I am so proud of what I wrote right here. There's some stuff in this book that that is handed down and has been handed down to a lot of people, and I write it and I'm not crediting anyone because it's not creditable. It's just general. Everybody teaches it to everybody else, but I made this up. When painting on location, color decisions result from three things: knowledge and intention, what's on your palette, and what you see. So it's what's there, but it's also like how you see it. Like you're seeing abilities partly, which is related to your knowledge and intention. So it's all three of those things, sometimes more one than the other two, but those are the three things. So yeah, so sometimes what's on my palette plays a really large role. Sometimes I'll take, you know, it's what I see, but I want it to be a certain different way and I make it that way more on purpose. Yeah, it's all those things. Well, I have spent a lot of my life asking myself, how would I mix that color? But you can't mix a single color in a painting and get it right. You have to mix two colors or the one won't be right.
Oh, I like that answer. I
Thank
like
you.
it a lot, for sure.
Good. Glad to hear that.
And to change the topic a little bit, I want to just ask about mark making, because it
Yeah.
seems that it's important in your work. And to me, your marks are, you know, they have a variety of shape, every painting, but they're very clean and they're very, what I think are intentional. Now, I might be entirely wrong on that, but if you could just talk about your mark making, that'd be fantastic.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. From my work, it looks like mark making is important because it is important to me.
I copied one of your teacups and a spoon painting, and I
Oh,
found myself going, oh yeah, that's a mark. That's a palette knife.
yeah.
Everything about it was very intentional, and I learned a lot from it.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again because
Excellent.
this is a topic that I'm pretty endlessly interested in and could talk about at length. There is a section in the book on marks and mark making, but this is the interesting thing to me is like, when is paint just paint and when does it say something? And I've used as the example, like a close-up of a section of a painting and then showing you the whole painting, where when you look at the whole painting, you don't really wonder what it is or what's happening. There's enough information that you just go, yeah, it's the sun setting behind some trees. But in the cropped image on the left, which is on my screen, it's like closer to life size. It's like a 16 by 20, I think. You can see that it's just slightly organized paint, right? So this question of like, and it's funny because I can remember this in college when I was, painting like this, that you can lay down a brushstroke. You just laid it down with your own hand with a brush, and yet you're looking at it and your brain is going, that's a thing, not a brushstroke, but the sun setting behind some trees or somebody's eyebrow. And so this dual nature of like, I want it to be both. I want it to be paint and have enough that it says something. So in the actual process of painting, it's something that needs to be approached gently. Because what often happens, as Jill Carver says, you make one mark and you're like, oh, I love that, I'm going to do it again. And you do it again, and then it's too much. Or like that first mark is now not doing what it did the first time. So you have to like pay attention. And if you lay one down that's like, oh, that's great, maybe that's all it needs, just that. So sometimes we just make things harder than they need to be.
Yeah, we have this inherent nature to keep going. I don't know many artists that can lay down a stroke and kind of just walk away.
And yet, how hard is that, like physically? Like if you take out the mental, like I'm wrestling with this and just go, okay, make one mark and stop. It's like, It's not like the bag of chips where you're like, have to eat the next one. You
It
really
is for many people though. Yeah, but it's a learned thing too. You can easily put a mark down, walk away, and have a look at it.
I was just going to say that for me, so much of it is often just seeing it done one time. Just seeing it done one time will completely open the door to you.
You mean like watching another artist do it and realizing how powerful it was?
Just realizing that that's how that painting got made, or how like you think of all the paintings that you've seen in museums where you're like, how did they do that? And then you see someone do it and they just like lay it down. You're like, that's it. He just laid it down. Oh my gosh. But then it really is that if there's enough knowledge to make that brushstroke.
Yeah, and chances are it's intentional, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. So here, just on the subject of abstraction, I also have, when is a shape just a shape and when does it become something? And for this, I'm using Mitchell Johnson because this is the question that he's throwing at us in every painting he ever does, which I love so much. Like, is it a towel thrown over the fence, or did he just put some stripes in his painting? Like, what about this part? Is it sunlight on fields, or did he just put some stripes in his painting? He stays in this zone and he plays with it, and I just love it.
You're killing me here. I never would have thought about that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I obviously have my answer, but then again, my brain wants it to be something. My brain wants it to be a towel. My brain wants it to be sunlight.
Oh yeah.
But I love the idea that it could be just red and white stripes.
Well, if you look at other paintings of his, in other paintings, it's much more clear that he just like laid a block of color in not randomly, but intentionally. And it's not something, it's just a block of color or just some stripes that he put in.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And then other times, like your brain is wanting like this. It's like, I kind of want it to be, a lawn chair that's just in the foreground.
True. It could be anything like that, right?
Love it.
Yeah. What I love about that though is the artist, in this case, Mitchell, made an intent and a purpose to lay this in, regardless of what the viewer is anticipating. And I think that is painting in the sense that you need to make a decision of what you're doing and have intent for when you're doing it. And that's what makes you as a painter, the painter, I guess, right? So this analogy is fantastic. Well, I know I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours.
It's pretty fun to chat.
Absolutely. Now, but it has been an hour and there's no real extraneous questions. So I do have 2 last questions.
Okay.
And I'm hoping the answers can be different for both. One is, what is the best piece of advice you have been given?
only show your best work.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And lastly, since you're prepared for it, what is your top piece of advice you would give others?
Pay attention to yourself. You have senses, feel things. You are the medium through which inspiration passes. So it's basically just don't leave yourself out. Like, take care of yourself. Don't try to circumvent yourself in the artistic process. Like, you're the thing. It has to come through you.
This has been wonderful. You can find Amy on the internet at amyerickson.com. You can find her on Instagram with her handle, #OneAim. And of course, don't forget to head on over to Amazon to check out and buy her book if you're so inclined. I've really enjoyed reading it, and I've got quite a few gems out of it. So I'm going to start building my color ladders just to see what it's like.
Michael, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor, and it's been really entertaining and fun and great to chat with you. And everyone, I would like to say too that if you do buy your book on Amazon, that it's super helpful right now to have reviews on there. They change the algorithm. So thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you so much for joining. And again, a big thank you to Amy. I really appreciate you agreeing to this interview. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. With that, I'll say good night, everybody. Take care. Cheers.